Guy on. Okay, that should be working. How are you all doing today? Good? Yeah? I appreciate you all being here. I know that it's honestly feels kind of early for me, but I've just got a timer on for 45 minutes, and at the 45-minute mark, if I'm not done, I will wrap up as quickly as possible so that I can take some questions if you have any. But we're going to be going over some kind of key orientation bits and pieces, mostly looking at how we can kind of survive with our study skills for a first year or first semester of uni. So my name is Catherine, and it's nice to meet all of you. So the first thing that I'm going to do is an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which our campuses here at Bedford Park and in the city and on Sturt are located. And these are the traditional lands of the Arrernte, Dagaman, First Nations of the Southeast, First Peoples of the River Murray and Marley regions, Jawoyn, Kaurna, Larrakia, Ngadjuri, Wiradjuri, Ramenguri, Wurundjeri, Wadjurman and Yolngu people, and we honour their elders past, present and emerging. So this is the team that I am from, the Student Learning Support Service. That is me with the bright yellow hair. I used to have it and then I cut it all off. But we are here as a support team for the students of the university. If you ever need any help with studying, assignment submission, writing, your English skills, whatever it might be, the Student Learning Support Service, we're here to help. And I will go through some of the ways that you can kind of support and contact us a little bit later on in the presentation. But let's start with essential study skills for uni. So I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you guys today. We're going to go over kind of essay writing skills, reading skills, time management skills, but I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by all of this information, even though you may. But feel free to take photos of the presentation at any point. Obviously, feel free to take notes, whatever you feel is going to be helpful for you. But the purpose of this presentation is to introduce you to some of this kind of terminology that you'll be seeing over and over again in your topic guides, course handbooks, whatever it might be, and to kind of ingratiate everyone into the language that we use at university and the kind of skills that we expect you to be learning throughout your degree. You don't need to be an expert now, but hopefully this will introduce you to the kind of university mindset. So there will always be opportunities to encounter this same kind of information again. So there will be a recording of this online presentation, and then there will also be guides, study guides, anything that you might need from the SLSS that we can help you with. So if you don't take it all in now, that's okay. We don't expect you to. All right, so this is kind of what we're going to be going over today: thinking, reading and writing at university, and finally referencing, which is the thing I get the most questions about in these orientation settings, and then finally some time management skills. We find that these are the biggest kind of roadblock barriers for commencing students, so hopefully this will be helpful. So first, let's start with critical thinking. So what is critical thinking? Essentially, at university, we expect that you will be able to reason your ideas. But what is critical thinking? It's essentially staying conscious of our thinking, confronting and interrogating our beliefs, and objective analysis and evaluation. This is at the heart of university study, and it helps us to formulate constructive arguments. And this is what all really of your assignments at university will be based on. This is the foundation of the kind of learning that we do. Critical thinking skills, and being able to essentially argue. So this is, what is an argument? In university, academic arguments are one of the ways that you hone and develop your critical thinking skills. And constructing an academic argument requires you to think about pros, cons, strengths, and weaknesses of a particular idea or theory. And what it does is it involves critiquing ideas and unpacking them. And again, this is kind of at the heart of most of the assignments that you will encounter in your studies. And what is an argument or an academic argument? Essentially, a claim which you justify with evidence, right? This is an academic argument. Essentially, think about creating an academic argument as if you are in front of a jury, right? That you're a lawyer, and essentially your claim is that your client couldn't have done the crime, right? And your justification is that this is because they were at a different place at the time the crime occurred, and then you might want to produce security footage of the shop that your client was at to prove this. So you've made your claim, you've offered justification, and you introduced your evidence. This is how you make an academic argument. So we might want to assume that we are being asked to argue kind of for or against, for example, free higher education, right? So to kind of see this idea in practice, if we're arguing for the idea of free higher education, a claim that we might make is that it would make, oh, that was the loudest email notification of all time. Let me turn that down. For, say, our claim for free higher education would be that it would relieve financial burden on everybody, right? So the justification for that claim is that, or we believe that higher education should be free. The justification of that would be that it would make everybody's lives easier. It would free up a financial burden, for example, and the evidence that we could be providing for that might be the facts of how much education costs, right? So this is how we kind of create that academic argument. And critical thinking is key to the production of academic arguments. So for example, the capacity to understand and evaluate the work of important researchers, the capacity to critically analyze literature, so identifying and analyzing arguments, evaluating logic, evaluating evidence, assessing knowledge claims to see how strong or weak or convincing they are. And also the capacity to reason positively in an academic environment. So making your own claims, presenting strong arguments, acknowledging debates, and acknowledging limitations. So this is all key to the way that we ask you to think, the way that we ask you to engage with knowledge and information in a university setting. And again, this isn't a skill that we expect you to have walking in the door, but this is essentially the end goal of where you should get to at kind of the, nearing the end of your university career. But this is what we strive towards, essentially the ability to think critically about the information that you're engaging in and the information that you are producing, whether in conversations, in dialogue, in tutes, or that might be in assignments that you're writing. But in order to think critically, we need to be reading critically. And reading is a big part of your university journey, no matter what degree you are in. I did my undergraduate in English, and that was a lot of reading. That was a novel a week, so I wouldn't put that on my worst enemy. But there will be a lot of reading that you have to do at university. So how do you read? Do you read often? Hands up if you read for fun. That's great. Okay. Hands up if you read like novels. Yeah. Does anybody read like articles, like news articles, newspaper? Yeah. Sometimes. Has anyone ever read an academic article before? Some of us, good start, honestly, that's a really good start. So we know how to engage with literature, we know how to read at least, that's a good first step. But when we read at university, the key skill that you will learn to do is read with a purpose. And the way that we read with a purpose is to read with questions. So interrogate that which you are reading. So this is maybe not how we engage if we are reading maybe ACOTAR, Court of Thorn and Roses. We might not be questioning too much the integrity of the book, but if we are reading at university, if we're reading these academic papers, if we're reading essays, we want to engage with questions. So a big question that you can ask is, what do I need to get out of this reading? What is the purpose of me doing what I'm doing? Again, going back to our critical thinking skills, we need to be engaging, analyzing, critiquing everything that we're engaging in university. So what do we need to get out of this reading? So you might be given some readings that are designed to be discussed in tutorials, along with a discussion question. So in that case, you are reading them so that you can further your knowledge and discuss them with your peers. You also might be thinking about using that reading for evidence in an essay, making that critical argument, making that academic argument. We might be reading for the purpose of creating an argument that we're going to be putting forth in an essay. So for example, if you are asking questions of your reading, so what do I need to get out of this? What kind of information is important for me to glean here? That helps you to read with focus. Another thing that you might want to do is think about what you already know. Okay, so there is a lot of information that you will be introduced to in lectures, in tutorials, in discussions with friends, with things that you might have read online, with things that you might know from your life experience. Always take these into consideration when you are reading. I guarantee you that what you will be encountering in your readings are reiterations of things that you may already have been introduced to, just in language that might not be as familiar. So go into your readings with confidence and with a purpose, and then also, if you have any milestones for your reading, you can also reward yourself. I know a lot of people who put lollies on the page. If they're reading a particularly difficult chapter of a textbook, a little chocolate after every page can be helpful to get you through. I know that reading at uni can be very dense and very intimidating, but have confidence. Think about what you already know, so in relation to lecture content or any other information, and read with a purpose. Don't go into your reading blind. Read with a question that you would like answered, right? This will help you to understand when you need to be engaging in depth and when you might be able to, for example, skim or scan over your reading. So another key point to academic reading, which may sound counterproductive, is you don't have to read everything. Sometimes it's about understanding where you need your focus to be. So everybody in this room, we're all busy, especially if you have a full course load, especially if you have a full course load and a full-time job and maybe kids and maybe, parents. Life is hard and busy, right? So sometimes it's about realizing where your time needs to be going. So this is a 5-point reading plan that we suggest that you use, especially if you're engaging in research, so you don't know what you're supposed to be reading or when or why. So predicting, so using knowledge like the title or abstract and your purpose for reading can predict whether what you're engaging in is even going to be relevant. So again, you don't need to read everything. It's about being strategic. Number 2, skimming. So skim through for keywords that might relate to your topic. You can then scan if the skimming is relevant. Read the introduction, read the conclusion, read the first sentence of every paragraph. This is a good way to get a general gist of what the article is telling you. And then if we see that these sentences or the intro and conclusion are relevant, this is where we actually spend more time on it by reading it fully and analysing it closely. And then finally we can note. So note down key ideas and why they are relevant. So this kind of reading plan can be particularly helpful if you are being asked to write a research essay, for example. You type in your key terms into the library search, a million articles pop up, you don't know where to start. This can be a really good kind of system to work through so that you can understand where you need to be spending your time and what is relevant. And these are some questions that you can ask yourself while reading, right? So again, I say read with a purpose, read with a question in mind, and these are some ones that I think are particularly helpful. So what is the aim of the author? What message is the author trying to send? What were the main arguments? Were the arguments supported by evidence? And is the evidence reliable? So again, a lot of these things are kind of common sense. So is the evidence reliable? Who are they quoting from, right? Are they quoting from Wikipedia or are they quoting from statistics or kind of evidence that they've found? Did the author influence your opinion and were you convinced by the arguments? Why or why not? What were the limitations of the study? And what do other researchers say? And how can you use the information from the text for your next assignment. So going in with a purpose is a good way to not get overwhelmed by your readings. And if you need a help with any of these kind of reading and critical thinking skills, the Student Learning Support Service, we have a Flow site, and that Flow site is self-enroll. So if you Google SLSS Flow or SLSS Canvas, our Canvas page will show up, and then essentially you just need to self-enroll, and this is one of our kind of categories for kind of organising our resources. So we have a lot of resources under reading and critical thinking, videos, PDF guides, recordings of lectures. So this is a good resource to go to if you need a hand with any of it. So moving on to writing at university, which is after we've done our critical thinking, we've done our reading, then it's time to do the writing, which can, for me at least, be the most boring part of the process, but it is necessary and you will be doing a lot of it at university. So it's always good to know what you're getting yourself into. So academic writing will allow you to kind of demonstrate your critical thinking skills and your strong academic reading skills. So academic arguments, that kind of claim and justification through evidence, that kind of building block of an academic argument, these are key in writing your assignments. So there are many forms and genres of academic writing, but the process of tackling a written assignment remains fairly consistent. And that is this process. So the first step is analysing your question, analysing what is being asked of you, talking to your tutor, emailing the topic coordinator, coming to us in the SLSS for clarification. But analysing is your first step. You want to make sure that before you start the process, you know what you're supposed to be doing with the process, right? The next step is scoping and brainstorming. So this is when we start thinking critically about what our assignment is asking of us. This is when we can start our note-taking process. This is when we can start the blue sky phase. This can be the fun part where you Google around, have a look on the library website, start collecting sources. Then we get to the planning phase. This is the phase that I skip over sometimes, but is not a good idea to skip over sometimes. So what you essentially want to provide yourself is a foundation to grow your assignment from. So that can be an essay plan, that can be notes on a page, that can be a collection of ideas that you want to form into something bigger. Then we are finally at the writing phase, and then at the editing and proofreading phase. So as you can see, writing is only a little portion of the process of writing at university, right? And it is equally as important as any of these other steps. But we start with analysing. So analysing means breaking something down to its component parts to see how it works as a whole. So if you're trying to analyse an assignment question, if you're trying to analyse what is being asked of you at a content level, the things that we can look for are content words, limiting words, and instructional words. So if this is our question, higher education should be free for all, discuss. Say you're being provided with this essay question in your class. The way that we want to break this down is find a content word. So these are words that relate to the topic and the main discussion points. So in this case, this would be higher education and free. The words that determine exactly what it is we're supposed to be writing about, the kind of keywords that you would kind of stick into your search terms, for example. Then we look for our limiting words. These are words that narrow the scope and make parameters more specific. So for example, if I took out the higher in higher education and I said education should be free for all, discuss, that would be a far different essay. We could talk about high school, we could talk about kindergarten, we could talk about primary school, we could talk about vocations, right? What we're talking about is higher education. Higher becomes a limiting word. It narrows our focus. So this tells us specifically what we're supposed to be talking about. And then finally, we want to look for our instructional word. So this just tells us how to do the assignment, right? Here, our instructional word is discuss. There will be a lot of other common instructional terms that you will find throughout your degree. This might be analyze, extrapolate, discuss, reason, describe. There are a lot of them. Essentially, these tell you what exactly it is your tutor is looking for. So these are the kind of main 3 component parts to an essay question: your content, limiting, and instructional terms. And these will determine exactly how you are supposed to answer the question, what exactly you're being asked to provide. Then we get to our scoping and brainstorming phase. So this is where you start the research process. So simple kind of general scoping searches will help here. So what resources or readings have you been given? And this will help give a feel for the topic and the conversations around it. So I always suggest to students start with your topic readings. If you're going into an assignment, the first thing that you want to do is read the readings that you've been provided by your tutor. They've given them to you for a reason. Start there. And then what you can do is start going onto the library search, using Google Scholar, finding these kind of reputable sources and having a look around. And this will help you get that kind of broader understanding of the topic. Then we get to our planning phase. So this is the most important part of the process. And a good planning stage kind of focuses your research, your reading and your writing. So these are just a few ways that you can plan. These may be helpful for you, they might not be. I just suggest that you kind of experiment, explore, finds what works best for you. But mind maps, linear planning, free writing, essay plans, and bullet point lists are the ones that we personally suggest. But any kind of planning is good planning, right? Then we get to our writing stage. So writing can be an intimidating process. It still is for me, and I'm writing my PhD, so that's a lot of words, but I get it. It can be a really intimidating process, but formal and simple language is the key for academic writing. I know that a lot of students come into writing academically or for university purposes and try to essentially find the biggest word or find the word using jargon or using kind of language that they expect is academic in nature. The key to academic writing is simple writing. The way that you can use language to be understood at its core, right? It doesn't need to be complex. The material is complex, not the writing. And use your language to demonstrate logic and argument. So using discourse markers, which is a term that if you ever encounter any of us at the SLSS ever again throughout your degree, you will hear multiple times. But discourse markers are essentially words like however, therefore, as a result, terms that mark the discourse that you're essentially reporting on. We also have reporting verbs. So these are our words like claims, writes, argues. So Smith claims, Mulvey establishes, these kind of words that essentially report these reporting verbs on what the authors are saying. And then, for example, a use of I pronouns is something to be really, really careful of. So in most academic writing, we suggest formal language, and formal language doesn't use I pronouns. Now, if you're writing a reflection, that is a totally different ballpark. So there usually will be explicit instructions on whether or not you can use I pronouns. So, writing I think or I believe, I experience. But in most academic writing, it's a good rule of thumb to use third person pronouns and to not refer to yourself, essentially, in the writing of the essay. And then finally, editing and proofreading. So editing is kind of having a look at the macro level, so content, accuracy, and clarity. Proofreading then goes to the micro level. So that's your mechanics like spelling and grammar, etc. You can explore strategies for both. We have a lot of strategies, again, on our academic writing skills kind of portion of the SLSS flow page. You can also find these on a Canvas, on a website that we have that you can get to if you Google SLSS resources. So moving on to referencing, how are we all feeling at the moment? Feeling okay? Thumbs up? Yeah? All right, let's get through referencing. Who has experienced doing referencing before? Some of us, yep, okay, that's a good start. If not, that is also okay, right? So the reason that we reference is because integrity is one of our key values at Flinders University. And academic integrity is a commitment to principles of honesty, respect, trust, and fairness. And the reason that we reference is to acknowledge that knowledge has come before us, and it's our duty as young researchers and young academics to use other people's work with integrity. And the way that we do that is by referencing their ideas, okay? So why do we reference? We reference to acknowledge the work of others, to enable someone access to the same resources, to show that you have conducted thorough and balanced research, to meet the requirements of academic integrity, and finally, to situate our work in an academic context. So you will be often asked to reference or cite essays, reports, reflections, critical analyses, whatever it might be. You will likely need to reference most assignments at university, and these are the reasons why we do that. Because we are researching to kind of create that academic argument, right? We need justification, and the way that we justify is through evidence. That evidence will mostly come in the form of citing from papers that have been written, citing from evidence that other people have collected, data that people have kind of done experiments on. All of this becomes a reference that we then cite in order to essentially pay respects to the knowledge that people have created before us. And when do we reference? We reference when you're using an idea which is not originally your own, okay? You reference if you are paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is putting someone else's words in your own language, which you'll be asked to do a lot of in university. Paraphrasing is really key to academic writing, to kind of taking in what somebody else has said, synthesizing it and putting it in your own words. But we still reference. We reference if we are quoting directly. So for example, if someone has said something so succinctly that I couldn't bear to write it myself because it would diminish the original meaning, I would put that in quotation marks and I would reference that. So if I was writing an essay about Shakespeare, I probably wouldn't want to paraphrase to be or not to be. That's pretty key. We just put that in quotation marks. And then remember that we reference ideas. So for example, if somebody came up with the key theory of genetics, we would reference them, right? If we're talking about genetics broadly, if we're using those key theories to expand our own ideas, we reference the people that kind of created those theories before us. Referencing is very common as a sticking point for a lot of people. So again, if there are issues that you're encountering, you can always feel free to check out resources or come in to see us, and I will explain how to do that at the end here. But referencing and integrating evidence is really a skill that you will grow over your university career because it entails a lot of auxiliary skills that come with it. So referencing and integrating evidence is as much about referencing as it is about writing, researching, reading, paraphrasing. It is an entire encompassing kind of broad net of skills. It is something that you will get better at as you go through your degree, but also something to be aware of before you start. So knowing essentially why you need to do those things is as good as knowing how to do them. You will encounter multiple different referencing styles throughout your degree. So some disciplines use APA 7, some disciplines use Harvard, some disciplines use MLA. There are different structures for how they're supposed to look and what kinds of evidence you're going to be asked to use. But knowing why you need to do it is an important piece of knowledge to have. So we're going to move on to what is kind of nearing the end of the presentation. So time management is a pretty big roadblock for a lot of students when they start out. Time management is a kind of broad number of skills. It encompasses, you cover a lot of ground when you're thinking about time management, and hopefully we can come up with some skills that might help you out. So to start, your semester is a 13 to 14 week semester. That's longer than you might think it is because you essentially have a SWOT vac at the end of that. So that is maybe studying time for assessments or studying time for exams, your writing essay period right at the end of the semester there. But most courses are based on that 13 to 14 week semester. There are some that work in trimesters, so you'll have 3 over the course of a year, but most of our programs are in 13 to 14 week semesters. Mid-semester breaks are in April and in September. So you will have a 2-week break in September. The structure of semester 2 is usually week 1 to 8, 2-week break. You come back for week usually 9 to 12, and then you will have 2 weeks where you are expected to be writing your final essays or studying for your exams. That's the general structure of semester 2 at uni. So the first few weeks of your semester are going to be dedicated to settling in and getting into the rhythm of study. I hate to break it to you, most of your first week classes are going to be icebreakers. So think of an interesting fact now, before you get in there. Think of something interesting about yourself. Think of 2 truths and a lie before we even get in there. Weeks 6 to 7 are when your first big assessments are usually due. So keep that in mind when it might come to scheduling work or scheduling holidays, scheduling breaks, whatever that might be. Weeks 6 to 7 are usually when your big assessments are due. This will likely be a culmination of what you have learned in the early parts of semester. It will usually be due in the mid-semester break. So keep that in mind when you're planning out what your semester will look like. And then in weeks 10 to 14, that's when your final assessments are due. And again, these will be a culmination of either what you've learned throughout the whole semester or what you have learned in the back end of the semester, so after the mid-semester break. Does anybody have any questions about this kind of breakdown? No? All right. Yeah?
Are there public holidays we'll have off during the semester?
I don't know how many public holidays we have in semester 2. Usually, if your class falls on a Monday and that Monday is a public holiday, you don't have to go to class. But sometimes the rest of the tutorials in the semester run. So it really depends on what your topic coordinator wants from the class. They will tell you, usually in week 1. So kind of keep that in mind when they are going through their entry tutorial or entry lecture. So how to organize your semester. It's very important to keep in mind your assignments will cluster around your mid-semester break and around the final weeks of the semester. Most of your assignments will be due in the same week, if not sometimes on the same day. Know this now so that we can figure out how we can organize our time leading up to that assessment being due. Now, we have extension policies in place at Flinders. Usually there is a 3-day leeway where you can request extensions of up to 3 days without needing to provide medical evidence or without needing to provide evidence of compassionate grounds. But there still needs to be a valid reason for this extension, and this is usually extenuating circumstances. So extenuating circumstances is usually not, I had a work shift or I'm a bit stressed or whatever it might be. Even though those are valid reasons to not have been able to kind of get on top of your work, hopefully what we can do is figure out at the start of the semester when things are going to be due so that we can plan for those really stressful and busy periods. So that mid-semester break period and the final week of semester are going to be really, really heavy in terms of cognitive workload. So what we can try to do is break up that cognitive workload over the semester to try to give us a little bit of breathing room. And how we might be able to cope with this is a diary or an online phone calendar to map your weekly schedule, or a semester planner. So I will say, being at Flinders, you will all have a Flinders email, yeah? Yep, that gives you access to an Outlook calendar. Outlook calendar is how I organize my life, but that is because also I have to use Teams for a living. So any kind of online calendar that you want to use can be a really, really helpful tool for what we call backwards mapping, which I'll get to in a moment. So FUSA has a semester planner. This is essentially what your semester looks like. I don't believe this QR code works. I wish it did. I don't think it does. But you will be able to find this if you're online by Googling FUSA semester planner. If you're in person, they usually have these at Ask Flinders, which is just below level 1 of the library, kind of outside near the common area there, near like the amphitheatre and the hub. So this is what the semester will look like. There are, let me see, I can see Labor Day in October as one of the public holidays there. But this semester planner will tell you when your weeks start, when the public holidays are, when O weeks are, when semester ends, all of that kind of stuff. So if you feel like this might be helpful for you, you can always go and grab one from FUSA. But also what we want to do is, once we get into our assignment, get into our flow pages, we want to have a look at our SAM, or our Statement of Assessment Methods. Every single topic has one of these. Every single flow page will have one of these. And this is essentially what it is that you have to complete, right? So this is an example one, but essentially you will be able to see what needs to be done and what percentage it will be of your overall grade. So I believe Matt has a session at 11:30, which will go over how grades are calculated, what grades look like, all that kind of stuff. But essentially, your overall grade for a topic will usually be broken down over certain different assessments during the semester. And having a look at your SAM at the beginning of the semester can really help you to plan for when you have those really busy periods. There will also be probably due dates outlined in the topic page so that you can note those down as well and pop those in a calendar. And then what we can do is essentially map a plan to completion. So you can consider the length, weighting, and research requirements of your assessment, and then work backwards to find out when you will want to start working on the assignment. So this might include a planning date, a research date, a draft start date, and an editing start date. And a way that we can do this is, so for example, if we have a look here, we have one assessment which is worth 40% and two that are worth 30. One of them is an exhibition, so an in-class presentation. Another one is weekly responses and quizzes. So for example, weekly responses and quizzes, that's not going to be super research or labor intensive, right? You have a set time every week where you sit down, you complete the thing that you need to complete. Artifact creation, for example, may be a much more research heavy or a research intensive process. So what we might want to do is say that this is due here. We may want to say, okay, I'm going to give myself a week to research. So we'll put the research start date here. You say, I might want to give myself a week to write, so we can push that back another week. I might want to give myself a week to edit. So we can put down those deadlines in a calendar to make sure that we are keeping ourselves on track for those really busy assessment periods. And when you consider the length, the weighting, and the research requirements, essentially you can make sure that you're not giving yourself too much or too little time to work on things. I see students in the Learning Lounge sometimes, they come in and they say, I really, really need help. I need help starting my assignment. And I go, fantastic, when's it due? And they go, tomorrow. And I'm like, wow, okay. So what we want to make sure is that, look, that is inevitable. I am sure that every single one of you will start an assignment the night before in your university career. It's nothing to be ashamed about. I've done it many times, but we want to make sure that in those really busy periods, we at least have a little bit of a plan for what needs to get done and when it's going to get done in a timely manner that is reasonable for how you work as an individual. So we also want to make sure that at university we are maximising our time. So your uni timetable can be deceiving. You all have access to your uni timetable? You know when you need to be here, where you're going? Yep. This may seem very comprehensive, but it can be really, really deceiving in terms of how much time you need to spend on your studies, and then also how much time you need to spend dedicating to all the myriad other things you have going on in your life. So your weekly contact hours may actually only take up a few hours a week, but your time will very quickly fill up with university commitments and other commitments. So this is a very scary little planner that I put together, but this may be what a kind of week for you ends up looking like. We have these weekly planners available to download and also in the Learning Lounge, but we may have a lecture on Monday morning and a tutorial. We then might need to start on editing an assignment, which might be due that week. We then might have work to go through. We then on Tuesday may have a huge gap, but we have a lecture and then a workshop, and then we have to write that forum post. We've got forum posts due, tutorials, seminars, referencing, editing, submitting, work, family commitments, planning the next assignment. A week can very, very quickly start to fill up. What I would suggest to you now is if writing out your time commitments works for you, do it as soon as you possibly can to make sure that you have a cohesive and coherent idea of where you will be spending your time. A lot of us are really time poor. A lot of us have so many commitments outside of university. So it's really, really important that you have an accurate understanding of where your time is going. And what I would also suggest when I write these for myself, and I'm in times of high stress, I've got things due, I have commitments, I write down how long it's going to take me to get places, what bus I need to catch, where the bus is leaving from and when I need to walk there. I schedule in food, right? I schedule in phone time, brain dead scroll time. I schedule in everything that I need to make sure that I have an accurate representation of how long I have to do things. Because there is actually nothing worse than sitting down and going, okay, I need to start my assignment, and realizing you only have an hour for what might need to take you 3. So make sure that you are being accurate to what you need to do. We can also use chunking as a time management process. So essentially what this does is it breaks projects into small and easily achievable tasks. And this is part of the process of what we call backwards mapping, which I showed you a little bit on the planner, the idea of starting with your due date and setting incremental due dates going backwards for how long it's going to take you to do these certain steps. And a way that we can do that is break down these larger, very intimidating processes into smaller, achievable, bite-sized chunks. So if you have an essay, so you have a 2,000-word research essay that you need to complete, you've given yourself 3 weeks, for example, to work on it. Those little incremental tasks could be my researching phase, my writing phase, my drafting phase. Or you can break those down even further into write your introduction, write your first paragraph, or even write 100 words or write 50 words. However, it's going to be more achievable to you. So this overwhelming process of looking at an entire assignment can be a huge hindrance for actually getting things done. So making sure that we can kind of separate these into more bite-sized pieces can be really helpful. And we can also space out our study. So I know that it might seem counterproductive, but taking more breaks is actually better for you. It's better for your cognitive load. It's better for being able to retain information. So studies show that students who space or chunk their learning memorize and understand it better. And this is really the opposite of cramming. Again, I'm not here to set unrealistic expectations. I'm sure a lot of you will cram the night before an exam or cram all of your study sessions into one. I'm not here to say don't do that. I'm here to say this also may work for you, right? It's all about figuring out how you're going to get through university in the most stress-free circumstance. So for example, session 1, 2, and 3, and what we might do is set 20 minutes and take a 10-minute break, 30 minutes, take a 10-minute break, 40 minutes, done. Is better than one single long session where you deny yourself food, water, going to the bathroom, whatever it might be. So really being realistic and checking in with the fact that you are a person that has needs, and you may get bored when you sit down to write. You might get bored when you sit down to read. You might need to take a break, and that's okay. As long as we can schedule these things in and not be surprised by them. That is the kind of key to making sure that we can study effectively. So to maximize your time, what you're going to do is be strategic about your schedule. So explore how you best work and schedule accordingly. If you work better at night, don't schedule yourself to do assignment writing in the morning. That was a big fatal flaw I had in undergrad, is that I for 3 years expected myself to become a morning person. It never happened. And so essentially what that meant is that every morning I would sit down in front of my computer and do nothing for 3 hours while drinking Ice Long Blacks. So then essentially when I graduated from the undergrad, became a little bit more realistic about who I am as a person, I started taking time in the evening, which worked better for me. Right? If you study better in a quiet room, put yourself in a quiet room. Don't be afraid to ask roommates, parents, whoever it is, please be quiet just for my 1 hour while I'm studying. Or kind of, if you have the kind of availability to do that, taking yourself to a quiet space. We have quiet spaces on the 3rd floor of the library that are completely silent and have relatively good views, right? So there are nice places where you can go here on campus if you need that. Just be realistic about who you are. There is no reason to expect yourself to become the perfect academic. That doesn't exist. And you need to work with what you're doing, where you're at, and the commitments that you have. So being realistic is the number one way to kind of make sure that you are succeeding at the level that you can. Study according to cognitive research. So don't expect that you are the exception to the rule that cognitive scientists have all discovered. That's another mistake I made. I was like, I love that, but I'm different. I can study for 3 hours in a row and not get tired and not get bored and not need to go to the toilet, right? I'm not that girl, neither are you. So make sure that you are being realistic again about what's actually going to work for you. Account for life events, travel, work, eating, and schedule around these. Again, you are a person, be realistic about that, and don't ignore those things just so that you can get something done quicker. And finally, be flexible. This is the hardest one because things don't always go to plan. You could write down a very meticulous weekly plan and a bomb gets dropped in the middle of your life. That happens. You get sick. People need you. It is what it is. What I will say is that never be afraid at university to ask people for help. People like me, I work for the Student Learning Support Service. It's in the name. We are a service meant to support students. So if there are things that you might need, if there are issues that you're having, you can always come in and ask for assignment help. You can go to FUSA, which is the Flinders University Student Association, if you need help with you're having financial troubles, if you need student help in terms of advocacy, if you want help with a resubmission, whatever those things might be. You can go to our health and counselling and disability services if you need help with any of that. You can go to Oasis if you would like wellness tips. We have a wide variety of services for you as students. Things will likely not go to plan every week of your degree, no matter how long that degree might be. So don't be afraid to be flexible and ask for that help. This seems maybe a little sad at this point, but try to have fun in your degree. You have the enormous privilege of being able to set time apart to be able to do this for whatever reason that might be. So good luck with it. What I will do is very quickly, I am going to show, oh goodness. There we go, there's my OneDrive. I'm going to find the SLSS student page. All right, here it is. We have a nice new website designed. But this shows you any and all of the support that we provide. So we have support for from learning advisors. So again, if you go here, you can come in person, you can access online support. If you study on Bedford Park campus, which I'm assuming you do, we have a learning lounge, which is on level 2 of the library. The library is that big building just diagonal to you there. But level 2 of the Central Library, we are open from 11 until 2 every day if you need study help. And then there is always all of our online study resources, which you can get to through here, and they're categorized so that they can be as helpful as possible. So now that I've come to the end of my presentation, does anybody have any questions for me? None at all. My God, you guys are smart. All right, how do we feel about embarking on this semester? Positive? Do you feel better than you did when you first walked in, or more stressed? A little more stressed? A little more stressed? That's understandable. I know that I just threw a lot of information at you, but I know that with the right supports and with the right mindset, you will be able to do it. Okay, I'm going to end the presentation formally here. I am going to shut my laptop and turn off my microphone. But if anybody would like to come up and ask me any questions, I will be here for the next 10 minutes. All right, do we all feel good? All right, perfect. Good luck. Of course.